I predict that what's going to happen is that it's just a matter of time before those generic medicines will be coming directly from China.
Yeah.
Into the mailboxes of Americans. And I say this because look what's happening with FDA inspections in China. I was very impressed, but certainly not a good direction, that the FDA Commissioner Califf last March of 2023, testified before Congress. This is on the FDA budget for 2024. And he said that was, again, March. He said the FDA had been blocked from going to China to do inspections until that January, 2 months prior.
Because of COVID?
And he also said that the country and their way of doing business, it's opaque. So when they ask for information as part of their FDA performing its regulatory function, it's just not anywhere near where we are now. And also he said something about the translators. If you're an FDA inspector, you go into the manufacturing plant, you need a translator. Are the translators really telling the truth to FDA inspectors? And also Congress had provided $10 million in funding for unannounced inspections in India and China. Again, one of the key tools that FDA uses to make sure that our medicines are made properly is on-site inspections. So if the three of us have a company outside of Baltimore, Maryland, the FDA can show up today at 4 o'clock and say, hey, we're coming in, we're going to start our inspection. Now, if you're another country like India and China, you have to get a visa and you have to tell them in advance because you are going into a foreign country. And so Congress said we've got to do something about this because there's a lot of things that can happen when you have an announced inspection. You can clean up a lot of things. And so they started the unannounced inspection program in India, and they had done about 35 of them. And Commissioner Califf said that they were not able to do any unannounced inspections in China. So what we're seeing is, in my view as a private citizen, that we are importing unregulated products. If you had a US company, say if we had a company, again, outside Baltimore, and we refused, for whatever reason, an FDA inspection, we would be shut down. So we have a two-tiered regulatory system. And I don't see that changing. And the other thing that happened in July of 2023, the State Department put out a travel advisory for Americans traveling to China, saying that they risk being detained in that country because of a new anti-espionage law that the Chinese had started July 1 of last year. And that under that anti-espionage law, you cannot take anything out of the country. Or if you're taking any documents or whatever it might be, you could be caught in a very obtuse situation where you could be detained and not really understand what law you broke. And so that is a huge deterrent to federal employees who volunteer for these overseas inspections to want to go there. And the FDA had already been having problems, even pre-COVID, to getting people to travel to that country to conduct inspections. So I hate to say it, but I think the days of the FDA's ability to protect the public from products coming from certain countries, it's sunsetting. And we have no leverage. We have no leverage to change that. And that's why I suggested back in 2019 before the House Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee that we have to start a testing program. So we know what's in those bottles. We know what's in those vials. And the FDA has known. It knows there are serious problems. There are people who've worked for the FDA who were doing studies for them, and I've seen the data. The tacrolimus, which is a immunosuppressant. The FDA has known for 10 years that some of those products don't dissolve properly because they're not manufactured properly. And when it doesn't dissolve properly, it means, as you know, the patient doesn't get therapeutic value as intended. And you can, you know, you're up for organ rejection and being put on a transplant list again. Levothyroxine, for thyroid. I've seen the results of studies of different products, and some of them come off the line perfectly fine and are stable over the course of weeks and months. But other products don't even, the same drug, but different manufacturers, they come off the line, they're not even right, or they come off the line fine, but then they quickly lose stability. And when that happens, then once again, your therapeutic value is compromised. And I believe that if any purchaser, whether it's a pharmacy or a hospital or a patient, that they should have access to information that these products have been independently tested. And it's a whole culture shift for the industry. They don't like it, but we have to start somewhere because it's just beyond the bounds of what the FDA can do because there's so many different products. They certainly have no handle on over-the-counter products. So we've got to start somewhere, and I think that would be a good thing for patients, a good thing for pharmacists, a good thing for doctors, for all of us, to really put quality back into the equation in our certainly our generic drug
So
supply.
we're in a presidential election year, and there seems to be a big gap between the two parties. And talking about our dependence on China in general has been talked about a lot, but dependence on any country when it comes to not just the price, but all these things you're talking about, quality and raw material and that kind of stuff. Does that even hit the top 10, top 20 list when you hear the campaigns and the lobbyists?
It does not. I was shocked when in 2020 there was an executive order that required the federal agencies and departments to give preference and buy US manufactured products, generic drugs. And there'd be, with OMB, some room to allow manufacturers to get paid a bit more to offset the dumping and other price manipulation. And bear in mind, people want to look, oh, well, it costs too much to make it. It will cost more, but if we look at all the machinations with the middlemen and the pricing, to me, that's far more pernicious. They're the ones that cut down on price. So there was this executive order. And it turns out, if you want to get into the weeds here, the United States signed up to be a member of the World Trade Organization. And as a member, we signed this thing called the Government Procurement Agreement. And when we sign that government procurement agreement, it means that our federal agencies have to treat, again, if we had a manufacturing plant in Baltimore, the three of us, our government would have to treat us the same as they would treat a competitor company in China or India.
And that's not, I would assume, like we'd have to treat them the same, but could we say, hey, we want to make sure you have all your inspections in order, or is that irrespective of that?
Well, this was to get an exemption. There was efforts to get an exemption from that on national security grounds. And we just want to do this for a small number of essential generic drugs, not our whole supply. So they went to WTO and said, yes, we want that. And there is an exemption for military equipment on national security grounds, an exemption from this government procurement agreement. And what happened when it went to WTO, there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and there were a handful of companies in Europe, who said, well, if you guys do that, we're going to not buy $400 million worth of product from the U.S. We're going to retaliate. So we got into this game, and the reality is there are very powerful forces that like the status quo for a lot of reasons. And maybe that's for another show, but they are working hard to maintain the status quo. And so that's why I think we need information in the marketplace to show that we have some bad bad products coming in that. And I tell people there's 100% certitude that if any pharmacy, any whether retail or hospital pharmacy, 100% probability that there are substandard drugs on the shelves of your place.
Wow.
And prove to me otherwise. I wish it weren't true, but prove it to me.
So, Rosemary,
Yeah.
I feel very small as a little pharmacist in Raleigh, North Carolina. Yeah. Tell
No, bless you for that, Tom. Don't underestimate your influence and what you can do for
but
people. Even if you help just one person,
give us some
that's
hope.
a big deal.
Give us some direction. What could we pray for at least that can maybe start moving the Titanic away from the iceberg?
One thing for folks on the front lines, I asked people who do pharmaceutical manufacturing. So what do you guys do? You know that there are problems out there, and these are the good guys who try to do it right. I said, so what do you guys do? And they say, well, we look when I go to the retail pharmacy, I look at the box to see who made it, and those guys have a sense of the quality culture of some different organizations. And I do the same thing. I had to a while back ago. I don't Unfortunately don't have to take any of these prescription drugs, and so a number of years ago, I looked at the box. I said, "Can I see the box?" And I saw the name on it. It says, "I'm not doing that." And I went to another pharmacy and I look at the box. No, I'm not doing that. Finally, went to a third pharmacy and found the name of the company, and I knew good people were contracting with them. And I said, I'm going to do that. They all may have been fine, but we're flying blind. But so that's what the people in the industry do. And I think if I were a pharmacist, and you alluded to this, Tom, I would be keep my eyes open for how patients are reacting to different um, medications, particularly if they've been on a generic of a certain manufacturer and it's switched. And I'm sure you've seen that because you can have a generic drug and one manufacturer's product may not have the same impact on the patient. And that's in part because they may use different fillers and buffers, and it turns out they can affect the functioning of the active ingredient. So I would just be alert to if you take something and a patient just doesn't seem right, check to see if they were switching, that the pharmacy had a different manufacturer of that
And
drug.
it's challenging, right? Because for over the counter product, like I take a allergy medicine, and I'm a pharmacist. I've been practicing for 25 years, and I would have been the first person, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to say, oh, the generic is just as good as the brand. But when I pick up and look at the generic manufacturer and can't pronounce it, don't recognize it, it does make you pick up the brand. You are going to pay more for a brand,
Right.
but at least you can recognize. And arguably, it might not be any safer. It might be the same, same active pharmaceutical ingredient that has the potential to be problematic. But at least you can look at it and see, okay, this is made by a company I recognize. It says it's made in the United States, or um, put together in the United States. But you can't do that with a prescription drug. I mean, the pharmacist can do that, but the individual can't do that.
That's right, and especially if their insurance only
Yeah,
covers
yeah.
certain products. But I really like where you're going with the over the counter. Look to see if you recognize the name of the company and at least if it's making the finished product here, because at least somebody's
Hmm.
accountable and their name is on the
Yeah.
box. And I'll also suggest for vitamins, US Pharmacopoeia, if you go into uh, some retail pharmacies and also Costco, a friend of mine is a member of Costco and brought to my attention how some of the Kirkland vitamins will have a USP, note on there saying some assurance from US Pharmacopoeia. And I think that's a good step forward. At least somebody of repute is taking a look at the product. So it's Kirkland vitamins, and I think also Nature Made. Those are sold in, as I recall, in retail pharmacies. At least it's some kind of indication. What I'd like to see is, I had to go get a new lamp, and it was delivered, and you see the underwriter's laboratory, label there. At least somebody has done something. And so when you turn the light on and leave your house, it's not going to, burn down your house. So I think we need this type of some sort of signal and information in the marketplace that somebody has taken a look at these products. And then we support those manufacturers that are taking the next step in giving that, as Kaiser Permanente says, giving patients an extra layer of assurance. And I think that's where we need to go. And I think we have to start with some of the big players. But what does that mean for us day to day? We're not a big player. We're just going in to get some prescriptions filled, or you're helping patients in a nursing home. I would look for any signs and signals. And if something doesn't seem right, if it doesn't look right, is there any opportunity for switching? Or how do we get to nursing homes? Is there a way to have some products independently tested? What if you guys asked your members, are there any generic drugs that, and if you've had some, gee, I wonder about this, is this really working right? And pooled and just did a survey, do a survey monkey. And what did they come up with? And are there any patterns? What are the most commonly used generics, say, in nursing homes? And what if there was some, independent testing done? And it doesn't cost, I mean, if to test a couple batches, it's doable. What if we did a small test of change and to get folks engaged and to have information like Kaiser's doing? What happened with Kaiser Permanente? They announced their testing program, and they told because they're a big buyer, and they said, well, we want you guys, you manufacturers, to have your products tested first, and if you want to bid to sell us drugs. It turns out some manufacturers chose not to bid. They didn't want to have their stuff tested. So I wonder if there's maybe a little small test of change that could be done to hear from your members if they've ever had any concerns, or maybe even their own personal, experience. What would you like to have tested? What would be the top 3 products you'd like to have tested? And then have some, maybe raise some funds and get that done. I think that could be, really interesting and empowering, because you're right, Tom, we have to empower people, not have people feel helpless, but we can actually do something.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if testing technology could be, Valisher went the other way. They had a pharmacy. When I got my scripts, I got a document with each one that said, the testing that it went through, and that checked off all the lists of things that could be wrong with it. That's tough to scale. Do you see that technology being technology that could be housed at a pharmacy? There might have to be some changes with how pharmacies purchase, because they would be testing a particular batch, and if they had a batch that they liked, which is what Valisher did, then they would only want to buy that batch, not just whatever, of that product that wholesaler wants to send, or that manufacturer wants to send. But I think there's real opportunity, especially as we start to get better at crunching and looking at data. If you want to call it artificial intelligence, maybe you could. But is somebody going to take thyroid drugs, because you brought those up? I don't think it would be a challenge for our membership to identify the manufacturer and the dose of the thyroid medication, collect the de-identified thyroid stimulating hormone data, and just look at it and say, is anything pop off the page? Is there a particular manufacturer who doesn't either super controls or under controls TSH versus others? And what does that mean? And then look at, okay, does this mean we need to be vigilant about testing narrow therapeutic index drugs, because those are easy to spot? There does seem to be things we can do.
So are you talking about look at
Yeah.
clinical data? Oh yeah, there's a academic medical center in New York, very prominent one, that noticed some issues with a generic manufacturers, and turns out test results verified their clinical data. So I think you're onto
Yeah.
something there. And I'd love to, talk offline about, what this could look like so we can empower pharmacists who are trying their best to take care of patients and have and make informed decisions. I would love to continue this
Yeah, we can
offline.
do that for sure. Um, well, just one last question I have. I know that there was, we're trying to find the silver lining or as Tom said, like the positives moving forward. Do you still feel like there's opportunity for manufacturing? I know that there's been I live in Northern Virginia. I know there's been some work in St. Petersburg on manufacturing. I don't know where that stands, but whether it's there or anywhere else, do you see that as a small step forward in getting enough customers and or investment and or government investment to get it off the ground?
Well, in Petersburg, there's Civica, and they will be opening up their insulin manufacturing facility there. And as some of you, your listeners and viewers may know, Civica came out and said, we're only going to charge X amount for insulin because we've just not been doing right by patients. And then everybody else followed suit. So they'll be producing 3 different insulins at a fair, transparent price, and that insulin is being made in their Petersburg facility, and that's a giant step forward. So that's really good news. And I understand that there are some U.S. based companies that have seen increased orders for certain products and expanding their facilities. Um, but we just have to grow that. And we really have to cut into this, uh, the current way that business has been done. And I think that can be challenging because if you're a big distributor or buyer, if you decide to say, well, gee, we're going to buy some more from the US and not from, say, China, just like governments, they can be threatened. Say, well, if you're going to do that, then maybe we won't be able to supply all that you need. So there's could be some of that dynamic going on. But in any event, I think for some discrete products, we are seeing some elements of progress, but we really need to ramp it up. And there's a lot of good people that would love to do that, but we got to get buyers. And I think steering hospital purchasers and pharmacy purchasers on the basis of quality is one way to do that, and to really raise the bar and cut out, go after this race to the bottom that we've had.
Well, all right, Rosemary, as advertised, it's been wonderful to catch up. Just compelling, and I hope the audience doesn't take it, a walk too negatively, because I think what I take from it is there are some things we could be doing, even we could be doing at the pharmacist and pharmacy level to help identify potential risk that's out there. But certainly we can be part of the solution, and we can advocate for solution from our membership and from the work that our pharmacies and pharmacists do. So we really appreciate you.
I think that's a great idea. That's how QI begins. We start with what we have and what we do
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and how do we begin to grow it from there. So yeah, and these are big, challenging issues. So it's not surprising that you know we've had certain habits going on for decades, and habits don't change, especially when there's a lot of money at stake. But we do see room for innovators and different ways of doing things. I think that's a great thing happening. And this testing, in fact, you might have seen that the test results just came out about acne products and how there's some, uh, benzene levels that are unacceptable. So I think increasing awareness and just some manufacturers know that somebody's looking.
Well, Rosemary, I want to thank you. I can't speak for the whole industry, but as someone that's a concerned citizen in general, but also, a pharmacist, I want to thank you for writing your book. I want to thank you for continue to press this issue and to talk about this issue, because, it starts with knowledge and awareness and the truth, and before anything can change. So, thank you for what you've already done and continue to do.
Well, I love coming and talking with you because we're all doing it for the same reasons, about the patient, and you're right there on the front line of the sharp end, and you feel a sense of responsibility to that patient and to do the right thing by them. And I have tremendous respect for you and your members for what you do every day. And how do we kind of take that upstream and try to fix parts of the system to help us be able to do right by them with quality products that any of us would want to have when we need them. So it's really always an honor to be with you. And again, I have tremendous respect for what you and your members do and how we can do it better together.
Thanks so much, Rosemary. Thanks, everybody. We're certainly going to invite Rosemary back in the future for more, but we'll see everybody next time on Our Experience.